Hey, welcome NFL football fans. It's that time again, time for another edition of NFL Football Talk. This is an Inside Sports production presented by Humanica Media. I'm your host, Charles E. Smith Jr., and we come at you every single week. You can follow me at Twitter at The Inside Sports. And remember, all through the NFL season, which is winding down, we're going to be here every single week, giving you the news and our views and see what changes are coming, what shakeups are coming, and also we pick the games of the week and all sorts of other good knowledge for you out there. So, I don't work alone here, but I have very high standards. I only work with the very, very best. So very proud to introduce my my favorite East Coast intellectual. Here he is. Man, many of you already follow on Twitter, and if not, you should be, at Chris L Sports. That's at CHRISL Sports. From an undisclosed location somewhere in Southern California, here he is, Mr. Chris Lardieri. Hey, Chris, what's up and out there, man?
Charles, thanks again for a tremendous introduction. I was actually on the East Coast last week trying to get some sort of intellectual capacity into my brain to bring to the show, so hopefully I do not disappoint this week.
Okay, well, you may have caused a major shakeup from what I understand. I mean, is there any coincidence that you go to the East Coast and now all of a sudden just major things breaking out there for you New York Giants?
Yeah, I guess I've got to be blamed for that. Not only that, we passed on going to what ended up being an ugly Chiefs-Giants game, which could have potentially been Eli Manning's last in the Meadowlands wearing the blue number 10 jersey. But look, it broke today. While I can't say I'm entirely surprised, I think what's shocking while also disgusting is that Geno Smith gets the start. I mean, if you're going to use the excuse that you're tanking a season and you want to see where you are, that's what you want. Geno Smith, a guy who can't even win against the Jets in the third quarter of our preseason game. Let Davis Webb play if you're going to do that. And I mean, look, we knew the end was probably coming at some point, but again, I've been beating this drum. I don't want to toot my own horn, but from the day the Giants signed Ben McAdoo, I was skeptical, and this guy has even exceeded my wildest or lowest expectations, as it were. So I don't know what's going on there. If the Giants ownership, I know they've got kind of this tradition of not firing coaches in midseason. They should have pulled the plug after that San Francisco game. What they're doing to Eli, whether you think he's done or not, is disrespectful. I mean, the Giants did something similar with Phil Simms. They released him in 1993.
Right.
The guy won him a Super Bowl and, for all intents and purposes, on his way taking him to a second one. But this is even more insulting. I don't know what's going on. All I can hope is that there's a major house cleaning in the Meadowlands come early January.
Yeah, and you got to think maybe, and maybe Eli winds up getting to do something we had talked about earlier in the season, which is, he's on there in years, obviously. Maybe he goes to a team that's a quarterback away, and next season he might get a shot at getting back to that big dance.
Yeah, I mean, the Jacksonville rumor's already out there, and judging by what Tom Coughlin said to a Jacksonville station today, I'm sure that light of hope is still alive. And, some people are theorizing Elway may want another washed up or close to being washed up Manning to quarterback his team. So the rumors will be abundant, to say the least.
Yeah, I think so. And it's good for Eli, too. When we look at it, it could work out for everyone all around because he definitely, regardless of, I know it's been kind of topsy-turvy and Eli has his detractors definitely, but hey, he deserves a shot, Jacksonville or Denver, and just one last shot at glory. And then, hey, either you ride on the white horse or you don't. That's it.
Absolutely. But I mean, at the very least, let the guy play it out. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think the streak is really what matters. And give the guy some dignity, a proper send off. If at some point he feels like he's in harm's way, so be it. But judging by his face today in the locker room, I don't think that was the case.
Yeah, that's true. So, hey, it's been a while since we did a broadcast. We took a couple of weeks off, Thanksgiving holiday and everything. But, last time we talked, Ezekiel Elliott may or may not have been playing, and it turned out he didn't. The Cowboys are now kind of in a tailspin. But I think it just shows when the announcers talk about the need for a running game to set up the pass. And what we're finding out is that, Dak Prescott is not a one-man army there in Dallas, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's what we kind of discussed in our preseason shows. Between the sophomore jinx and the fact that they one of the top running backs in the NFL, they clearly miss him. Even with Zeke, Dak's had his problems. I think the NFL has caught up to him, and they've kind of dared teams to let them beat him. I also think too, hindsight's 2020. I get it, but should Elliott, knowing what he's facing and the way Roger Goodell is and steadfast and digging in, should he have taken his suspension at the beginning of the season? Because you look now, I'm not saying the Cowboys would have been contenders, but they're heading to a brutal stretch of the schedule, and honestly, it really looked like they could have used them Thursday and on Thanksgiving in Dallas. And one other thing to note, Darren McFadden clearly wasn't the answer. He retired from football today, so that says a lot too.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So let's go ahead and move on from that. And, there's someone else doing some great work there. And I like the fact that sometimes the stars align for something really, really great. And when I look at Carson Wentz in that NFC East just tearing it up, and here in a couple of weeks, he's going to be out here to play Jared Goff, who came in the same draft class with him. And they're going to rock and roll right out here at the Coliseum here in Southern California. So you got to love what Jared Goff is doing in his second year, and also Carson Wentz. But it looks like Carson Wentz is really kind of above really on the curve. He's really at the top end there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are talking about him as a potential favorite for MVP right now. They're kind of heading into a tough stretch here. They're going to play the Seahawks and then the Rams, both on the road, 2 key matchups. So we'll see what he's made of. I think this will be his biggest test of the season so far. But from a Rams perspective, hey, we haven't heard anyone criticizing Les Snead trading up to get Jared Goff, or should they have picked Wentz instead? So it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I'm hoping NBC flexes it, makes it the Sunday night game, so a lot more people can watch it.
Yeah, that's true. And it's what I like with the Rams. We got to talk about our hometown team here. And, hey, Goff not only tearing it up, what I liked was this past weekend when they beat New Orleans, we also had Sammy Watkins, getting in there, finally getting a chance due to injury. He goes and gets in, and Watkins is probably the most talented receiver they have on the roster, even though for some reason he and Goff have not been able to get on the same page. But it looks like that might finally be happening now for the Rams too.
Yeah, from a purely selfish perspective, having him on my fantasy team and starting him last week, I hope it does continue. But look, the guy's immensely talented, and if anything, with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp also playing, it's hard to account for all 3 of those guys. They've really got a nice trio of receivers there.
Yeah, definitely. And, looking at Minnesota, of course, Minnesota's riding a 7-game win streak. It looks like Atlanta may be getting back on track. So the NFC playoffs, I mean, AFC, there's just a couple of teams, but NFC, you can look at any number of maybe 5 or 6 teams. And in Carolina, they're playing well, and it looks like Cam Newton may have gotten the swagger back that he had 2 seasons ago. He's finally over the Super Bowl and everything else, and shoulders looking good. Greg Olson's back on the field. So going in, I mean, Carolina, New Orleans, Minnesota, the LA Rams, the Atlanta Falcons, the Philadelphia Eagles, it's going to be wild.
It's a really stacked conference this year. And when you look on the flip side, and as of right now, Tennessee and Jacksonville make the playoffs. I mean, deceiving what their records are, but I don't think they're anywhere near in the category of, say, Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, even Minnesota. I know some people are skeptical of them. That's a 9-2 team with a really tough defense. I think any of those teams at this point probably wish they were in the AFC.
Yeah, that's true. So, and jumping over to the AFC, the Steelers making, as I still say, I think the AFC is theirs to lose, but making and this is why just a little note for some people who might gamble occasionally. When the Steelers are playing and there's a wide spread like they had against the Packers this past week, they never cover it. They just don't. The Steelers can take what should be an easy game and turn it into an adventure. They will win those games, but they'll wind up winning by 6, 7, maybe 8 points or something like that. But I can't figure them out. I'd like to see them really start just steamrolling teams, and especially steamrolling weaker teams.
Yeah, definitely, because right around the corner, they're going to be playing the Patriots in a game that will ultimately decide the number 1 seed in the AFC. So better get their act together this coming Monday night in Cincinnati, or else Patriots are really going to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah, it's true. And the Patriots, I don't know how they keep doing it, but at a certain point, you just got to give them props. Belichick and Brady, I don't know how. Nobody does, but hey, they just keep doing it. The best duo probably in history there.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a team everyone was pretty much writing off because their defense was so atrocious. And even on that side of the ball, it looks like Belichick and Matt Patricia had figured things out, and the secondaries kind of gotten organized. So yet again, they've got to be the front runners on that side of the conference.
Yep, there we go. Okay, everybody. So like I said, we have different segments here. About to get into the picks of the week, where we take 5 of the more intriguing matchups and give you our take on those. We give you our so-called expert opinions, see how they line up with yours. We have fantasy football advice and also our Gambler's Delight special coming up. But before we get into that, Mr. Lardieri, a few moments, please share some of your wisdom with the fans.
This is going to come as a shock to our loyal viewers and listeners, but got something positive to say about Roger Goodell. Last week in New York, I went with my son, my brother, and a good friend of mine to something called the NFL Experience in Times Square. And it's a little bit of an interactive type museum, history of the NFL type thing. They've got a lot of memorabilia, interactive videos. They got a really cool 4D movie with seats that vibrate and move as players get tackled. One point, weather comes into play. I won't ruin the surprise for you, but really cool. They've got the Lombardi Trophy on display, a bunch of Super Bowl rings, and even some green screen features, including a one where you pretend to get decked by a Gatorade bath, which my son and I really enjoyed. But it looks out on Times Square. It's really cool. I believe the grand opening is later this week. We got a sneak peek at it the second day it was open. So if you're in the New York area, check it out. My son is a diehard football fan. Liked it a lot. I mean, the workers are all very friendly. They've even got, it wasn't open yet, they got a bar in there. You could watch games and order food and beer. They've got a guy walking around selling popcorn, which is pretty cool, like you're at a game. So Roger Goodell, good job there. I've got to hand it to you. We're going to be fair here.
All righty. So, well, you always got to give credit where it's due. And, I guess Jerry Jones is not going to sue the NFL because of Roger Goodell. Then who exactly was he going to sue? It says the NFL. What is that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Is that like the Illuminati? I really don't know. I think at some point Jerry. I mean, we know Jerry is. He's got a big ego, and
right.
He invented the NFL and created the brand that is the Dallas Cowboys. But at some point, I don't know if his soul's been entered by the ghost of Al Davis. But this has reminded me of Davis and Pete Rozelle back in the day, where it seems like whenever Al didn't get his way, it ended up in court. So this is purely fascinating to see how Kraft and Jones have turned on Goodell in the last couple of years.
Okay, there you go. Okay, folks, so let's go ahead and get into the picks of the week. We're not doing badly so far here on the season, and we do this every week, minus the couple of weeks we skip, but I'm looking at, I'm 33-17 on the season. Chris is right behind me at 30-20. So let's go ahead and get into the picks of the week, and the very first game, Mr. Lardieri, take it away.
A fascinating, excellent matchup here in the NFC. The Vikings, who are actually, believe it or not, 3-point underdogs, head into Atlanta to the brand new Mercedes-Benz Dome to take on the Falcons. These are two teams that have really kind of been on a roll lately. Case Keenum, look, apparently the problem in LA was not Case Keenum and Jared Goff. It was Jeff Fisher and his offensive crew were really that atrocious, because Keenum looks like a different quarterback. Adam Thielen, really an underrated player, in my opinion. We know a lot about that defense. On the flip side, I guess for the Falcons, Steve Sarkisian's gotten things on track, because Julio Jones had a Julio-type day with 2 touchdowns, 250-plus yards receiving. Even Mohamed Sanu, high school quarterback in New Jersey, at one point threw a nice bomb to Julio. So I think this could potentially be an excellent matchup. Don't know why. I think this is more of an intuitive momentum type pick, but I'm going to go with the Falcons. They're at home. I feel like their offense is clicking a little more, while the Vikings have really done well offensively under Keenum. I do think this is going to be a major challenge for them going down there. I think it'll be a close, hard-fought game, but I like the way the Falcons are playing. No disrespect to the Vikings.
Yeah, well, it's, Falcons have won 3 straight. They've won 4 or 5. The Minnesota has won 7 straight games. So yeah, it's hard to pick here, and it's easy to go with the Falcons, maybe the home field advantage. But I like the Vikings. I think their defense is hungrier. Their defense is better than the Falcons, and I think that will be the difference in the game here. They can get after Matt Ryan a little bit and take away that time that he has to find Julio Jones down the field. But this is going to be a great game. Probably the game of the week, unless it's the game that we're going to pick pretty soon here. But I'm going to go ahead and take Minnesota to win this game.
Right off the bat, we disagree. It's good that things are back to normal after a 2-week hiatus.
There we go. So the next game, Detroit Lions. They lost to Minnesota on Thanksgiving Day. That snapped a 3-game winning streak for them. Then we got Baltimore. Baltimore sitting 6-5. Both these teams are 6-5, right on the fringes of the playoff hunt. Baltimore, though, has won 3 of 4 games. But when I look at this game, I kind of like Baltimore, even though they win ugly. They just play ugly. And whether win or lose, it's just an ugly game when it comes to Baltimore. No disrespect to the team or their fans. But I think they're headed in the right direction right now to win games the way they want to. And with Detroit, when I look at their 6 wins, not really impressive. The only win they have is, I think, there was the week 2 win against Minnesota. They beat them 14-7. But other than that, they beat a bunch of non-playoff teams. So with that in mind, I'm going to say Baltimore. I like Baltimore playing a little bit tougher football. And Detroit goes in there. I think they get dragged into deep water. You're going to see Stafford have kind of an ugly day. And I like Baltimore in this one.
Yeah, the Ravens play ugly football, but we passed through Baltimore on our way back from D.C. last week, and I must say it's a very nice stadium right near Camden Yards there. But that said, I think this is another tough game to pick between two teams that you never know who's gonna show up on a week-to-week basis. I'm going to pick the Lions solely because I think at this point this could make or break their season. They're coming off 3 extra days rest, whereas the Ravens played last night. A nice win, albeit against a banged-up and weakened Texans team. At the end of the day, I do think Matt Stafford will will his way and carry this team to victory. I don't know why or how, other than the fact that I think the defense at some point is going to have to force some turnovers and make Flacco look mediocre like he has at various points this season. So I'll go with Detroit to keep their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, and when you talk about Flacco looking mediocre, I was surprised what they said on Monday Night Football when Sean McDonough talked about Flacco not really forcing the ball down the field, and him wondering that since they won that Super Bowl, he hasn't really looked the same since, or even before, as he said. So you wonder, is he actually that good, or did he just happen to catch lightning in a bottle for 4 or 5 weeks and they won the Super Bowl? So some pretty harsh criticism, which you don't normally see on a football broadcast, especially from the play-by-play guy.
Yeah, and that's naturally because John Gruden doesn't criticize anyone, so Sean's got to pick up the slack. But I agree that it was interesting.
Okay, so, hey, next game on the docket, and this should be a barn burner. Take it away, Chris.
Another excellent one between 2 NFC South contenders. The Panthers go into New Orleans, into the Superdome. This game could easily have ramifications to see who's in the driver's seat for first place in that division. Going back years, I mean, these 2 teams always seem to have hard-fought battles, and teams you think shouldn't win do, and vice versa, and the road team comes in and gets big victories. I'm going to go with the Panthers. I really think they're on a roll. While I don't think Cam is playing spectacular football right now, apparently Kelvin Benjamin was a problem in Charlotte, because once they shipped him out of town, that team seems to have rebounded. But what I see and watching some of the Rams-Saints game, what stuck out to me is the Saints are clearly a running team. Alvin Kamara probably was front runner for Rookie of the Year. Really helped that offense. But at the end of the day, if you can stop the run in spurts and force Breeze to throw, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, it worked for the Rams last week. And I think the Panthers defense is really playing well right now. As we mentioned before, Luke Kuechly plays, the Panthers seem to win. So I'm going to go with Carolina.
Yeah, I like that. And the fact that Cam Newton looking more and more comfortable, and Greg Olsen is back in the lineup too, as he said he's got his dog back, so that's good for the Panthers. But also, when I look at New Orleans, they not only did they lose to the Rams, and really, if the Rams had a little bit more of the killer instinct that they really need to get to the next level, I think that game really wouldn't even have been close. But the week before, they really truly should have lost to Washington as well. So what I'm seeing is New Orleans, they're kind of trending a little bit downward now. Maybe teams are getting used to what to expect and understanding that Breeze isn't going to just put it in the air 50 times a game. But I like, for all the reasons you said, that Carolina defense, Luke Kuechly in the middle, I think Carolina goes in, and I think they're going to take this game. So I got to agree with you on this one, definitely.
That's a rarity. This is music to my ears.
Okay, and then the next one, hey, you know what? Not every game is a barn burner. Some of them are just interesting. So the Denver Broncos at 3-8, they've lost 7 straight games. They were once 2-1, and then the wheels came off. in Miami to play the Dolphins. Dolphins lost 5 straight. They're 4-7. They were once 4-2 before their wheels came off. So 2 teams, 2 buses with the wheels off. So where do you go with this one? Well, from what I understand, Matt Moore is going to – I think he's going to get the start again this week, is because Cutler, thankfully, is in concussion protocol. When I say thankfully, I mean for the team, not for his future health as a human being, everybody. Okay, I understand concussions are serious. But, yeah, 2 teams also with good defenses that got tired of being on the field all the time for every play. So I'm going to go with the hometown Dolphins here. I think finally the Dolphins get it together. I think the team does kind of like having Matt Moore there at QB. And this is a time to come in. If they can get after the Broncos a little bit, get them down early, I think we can get a victory there. My Dolphins. I'm going to go with the Dolphins.
I'm going to agree with you. Not a heck of a lot of analysis here other than I know Aqib Talib won't be there to rip off anyone's gold chain and start a near riot. So at the end of the day, as mediocre word you'd like to use to describe Matt Moore is, he's better than whoever Denver puts behind center. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins. And, I get what you say about Jay Cutler. Nothing personal, but let's face it, this guy's got a job lined up for when he ultimately retires again with Fox.
And, I just got a full disclosure. It was between this and the game between the Giants and the Raiders. So it was like with the Giants, do you want to pick a team with Geno Smith versus a team with no receivers? So we could have analyzed that game as well, but this one wound up on a coin toss, and we're both going with Miami.
I get it. Yeah, we could have padded our victory total with Oakland picks, so at least we had to think on this one.
That's true. So let's go ahead and break down this last game here, Chris. Should be a good one. Irresistible force and immovable object.
Sure, absolutely. The NFC front runners, the Philadelphia Eagles, head up to the Pacific Northwest to play the Seattle Seahawks and their 12th man. Look, I love the way that Carson Wentz has played this year. All props to him, but we've discussed this. This is a team that really hasn't been tested too much other than playing Carolina on a Thursday night. This is test number 1 of this stretch run here. And got to hand it to Russell Wilson as well. This team seems to have a different running back every week, lots of injuries, issues on the offensive line, and yet he still got them in playoff contention. Mm-hmm. I know the Seahawks are missing Richard Sherman. They're banged up in their secondary, but based solely off of home field and the sheer will that Russell Wilson has to win, I'm going to go for the Seahawks here off of a lot of gut and the fact that I'm kind of skeptical somewhat in the Eagles right now, and until they prove me wrong, I'm going to go with Seattle.
Well, I got to go with, the Eagles are a 5-point favorite in this game, but I'm going to go ahead with the Eagles, and I would think I might agree with you had they not picked up Jay Ajayi a few weeks ago, but with Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount in the backfield, I mean, you get tired of those 2 big hammers just coming at you, and by the third quarter, defenses start to wear down. That starts to open things up. And I love Seattle. I love watching Russell Wilson just is magical. Only way to say it is magical. And the difference between he and Michael Vick is that not Vick, but Wilson has those nimble feet. So no matter which way he's rolling, he can just on a dime set his feet and throw the ball and drive it downfield to a receiver. That's something that Michael Vick could never do. He couldn't get his feet in the right positions if he's rolling to his opposite side. But that said, Philadelphia is the real deal. I think this is going to be a good test for them, but when the smoke clears, I think they emerge victorious, and this will be victory number 10 in a row for the Eagles.
The glorious Eagles.
Okay, so that's it. We've done the picks of the week, so now comes one of our favorite segments here, and this is for obviously just entertainment purposes. If you happen to be in Vegas where gambling is actually illegal, you're wandering by the sports book, you got $20 burning a hole in your pocket, and you just got to bet on a football game. What are you going to do? So we pick a game here. We pick the Gambler's Delight every week here. So far in the season, I'm 6-4. I believe Chris is sitting at 8-2 on the season. So, Chris, go ahead. You're the champion. What do you think? What's your Gambler's Delight pick for the week?
Sure. So I'm going to go one of the games we picked. The Panthers are actually getting 4 points in New Orleans. I think that's a lot. You know my theory. I like to pick teams getting points. I like it when they get more than 3.5 points, whatever the case is. you're getting 4 here. Well, I think the Panthers will win outright. I'll hedge my bets and say that the game will be close. I could see them at worst losing by a field goal. This is a team, like I said, has a lot of momentum going right now. I do think that there's a very good chance they will win, but you never know in the NFL. There's a lot of backdoor covering and strange things that happen late in games. So take the Panthers plus the 4. If you were looking somewhere else, the fact that the Seahawks are getting 5 at home, I just wanted to point out I don't think that's happened in 5 years. So that one really stuck out to me. I just didn't have the guts to do it and have a little more faith in Carolina. But that's definitely one line that made my eyes bug out a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? I'm going to stick on that same game and go back to something I said at the beginning of the season with the New Orleans Saints, and that is whenever New Orleans plays, you're probably pretty safe if you bet the over. The over-under on this game is 48 points. I like that. I'm going to go ahead and play the over on that. So I'm going to say on the Carolina-New Orleans game, over 48 points. You play the over, take Carolina on the points, and, hey, you come out a double winner next week, and you can thank both of us on Tuesday.
So a 28-21 Carolina victory it is. I like it.
Okay, so that's it. We've done the picks, the Gambler's Delight, and now for all of you who may follow the league as opposed to watching games. I guess that's the problem here with the NFL. But anyways, fantasy football time with resident expert Mr. Lardieri, many years of experience and wisdom. So, Mr. Lardieri, you have the floor. Fantasy football.
Thank you. Look, I clinched first place in my league, a 14-team league. I have 1 loss. I'm still stunned at how it's happened, but I want to point out one thing. My quarterbacks stink. Marcus Mariota's had an average year at best. I wound up with Jacoby Brissett as a backup at some point and not quite sure how. I get my points from the likes of Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Sterling Shepard a few weeks ago. So the point is, you don't need a great quarterback. You're looking for someone out there on waivers. Start building that running back and wide receiver depth. And then that gets into my advice for the week. If you're in the playoff hunt, you've got to be aggressive out there on waivers. Any one game can really swing things. You get into a tiebreaker, you could sneak in. And at that point, you just want to be in the playoffs. A lot like the NFL itself, the number 1 seed doesn't always win. So there are a couple names out there that I find interesting. If by some chance Case Keenum's out there, and he may very well be in some of these leagues that aren't as deep, grab him. He's really playing well. I was skeptical. I let him get away. I wish I had him now. Kind of a deeper sleeper pick. Jimmy Garoppolo was named starter for the 49ers this week. Mm-hmm. This guy's going to be auditioning for a job. They play the Bears. They got a couple other favorable matchups coming up. Go grab him and his wide receiver, Marquise Goodwin. He's been playing well. I think he'll benefit from Garoppolo being the starter as opposed to C.J. Beathard. That's another one. You need a running back. There are 2 out there I recommend. There's Devontae Booker with the Broncos. This is a team that's clearly in disarray, and he's going to look to make a name for himself. He's getting more touches gradually. I mean, the bad team, who cares? As long as he gets a rock, gets you a touchdown, go grab him. You could probably be had in a lot of leagues. And then also, too, I've got Doug Martin. I think it might be time to cut bait on him. Jaquiz Rodgers played for him while Martin was suspended at the beginning of the year. I think he's worth a look. He runs effectively. You need a running back or someone's hurt or you're stuck with these duds the Cowboys have. Go get him. You need to stream a defense this week. The LA Chargers, I mean, look who they play, the Cleveland Browns. That's always good news for your football team, your fantasy team, anything other than the city of Cleveland. So there's someone to get right there. And finally, if you're like me and you're a number 1 or a number 2 seed and you know that your team's going to have a bye if your playoffs start week 14, basically you need to start looking at the schedule and figure out who's going to be playing in week 15. I know the Patriots play the Steelers. You might not want either of those defenses because those teams look like they've been putting up points. That's just one thing to point out. And then look to see who's playing the Browns, for instance, that week. Or I think the Broncos play the Colts that week. That could be a case where a lot of offensive players run wild. So start doing your homework. If not, and you're going to get in the playoffs, start looking at the week 14 matchup. This is the week where you can go on waivers and pick up a guy who may have a bad matchup this week that everyone will overlook and go get. So good luck. I hope you make it. And even though I've got 1 loss, I'm still kicking myself for not taking Jared Goff from free agency in week 1.
So one thing we know is if you're in fantasy football, do not get into a league with Mr. Lardieri because the best you can do is hope to finish second place, pretty much.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually one of the rare occasions where I've been in first at the regular season. I've been more like the 9-7 Giants when I make my Super Bowl runs back in back in the day. But yeah, I mean, for whatever reason this year the stars were aligned. Dodged the injury bullet, knock knock, and it appears as though picking Julio Jones, even though he was mediocre for most of the year, over Odell Beckham Jr. made me look like a genius, when in reality it was just the luck of the injury draw.
Right. There you go. Okay, everybody. So we covered it. NFL news, the picks of the week, Gambler's Delight, fantasy football, one-stop shopping right here on NFL Football Talk. Remember, this is an Inside Sports production. Charles E. Smith Jr., Chris Lardieri, every single week through the season and the playoffs all the way through to the Super Bowl. We'll be here for you. Follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. Follow Chris on Twitter at Chris L Sports. That's at CHRIS, the letter L, and then sports. Remember everything, fantasy football, whatever you want. One-stop shopping is right here. We're kind of like Walmart without all of the union problems.
How about poor service and lines at the cashier too? That's the thorn in my side.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Chris, before we sign off, any words of wisdom for everybody out there?
Yeah, a couple quick hits. So this Aqib Talib Michael Crabtree fight resulted in both players being suspended for 2 games, and everyone was talking about how the NFL laid down the law and the hammer dropped. And then right before the show started tonight, I see that they were reduced to 1 game, and this is what drives people nuts in the NFL. There's no rhyme or reason to suspensions. Elliott gets 6 games, where it's questionable as to whether he deserved that much, and then 2 guys have fights over a gold chain and beating the crap out of each other on the field 2 years in a row, and they only get 1 game. So yet again, the NFL leaves me scratching my head. And then note, I didn't realize this because I was out of town, but former Ohio State great, also played with the Patriots and Cowboys in the NFL, Terry Glenn passed away in a car accident last week in Dallas. Really sad when you consider he's a young guy, and he was Drew Bledsoe's favorite target. So sorry to hear that. My condolences to his family, but kind of bummed me out when I read that, just because it's not like he was a older NFL player who kind of lived a good life. Just very tragic to see that, especially for one of Bill Parcells' favorite receivers, as I remember him.
Yeah, well, Parcells definitely initiated him into the league, that's for sure. And yeah, only 43 years old, and also he caught Tom Brady's first ever touchdown pass as well. So yeah, definitely thoughts and prayers go out to the family, even though that's not the thing to do anymore, because thoughts and prayers don't help anything. I'm reading all over social media. But you know what? I don't care. That's what I do. That's what I say. If you got a problem with it, hey, you know what? You just deal.
Well, thoughts and prayers don't help on social media. They're supposed to stay in your head, so that's what I do.
Okay, everybody, remember that's NFL Football Talk, Inside Sports Production. And also for all you NBA fans, we do have on the same platform here, presented by Humanica Media, we do have NBA every now and then, and that is hosted by Gerald Glassford and Anthony Barbarin. They also offer some good expert advice on the NBA upcoming games and such. So for Mr. Chris Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith Jr. signing off. Thank you for watching NFL Football Talk, Inside Sports Production, presented by Humanica Media. We will see you next week.